This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to Spiritual Psychic with Sara Wiseman, where you'll learn how to unlock the secrets of spiritual intuition and your own psychic gifts. Here's Sara.
Welcome everyone to Visionary Psychics. I'm Sara Wiseman, and I am here today with one of our visionary psychics, JENNA Forster. JENNA, welcome to our little summit that we're doing here.
Thanks, Sara. Hi, everybody.
Yeah. So I'm so happy that JENNA's here because she sort of inhabits this really unique position. She's an executive coach, and then she began to do all this intuitive study in the groups that we do, and so has kind of merged the executive coaching with some of the intuitive gifts that she has also. And JENNA, I'd love for you to just kind of tell us about kind of like where this impetus came from to add these different types of skills into a practice that was already doing great. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it started out being I would say a bit centered on me because I was craving a bit broader conversation, right? So
yeah.
I've been a coach for 2 decades, and I was craving a new entrance point into conversation, new things to guide me, right? I always was connected to something larger than me, and I always craved a connection, a spiritual connection. And I felt this calling that other people were too. And especially in corporate, there's this big shift, in my opinion, that people are wanting to talk about things in a more broad way, in a more something that means something to them, something that connects to them rather than the very typical conversation. And so that really started it. And then I'm just this really curious person. And so I was, you start digging and you start moving along and you start learning. And then I've always been a clairaudient where I would hear words or, and I never really knew what they were. So I never really followed that until I met you, and then we got to do some work together, and it just opened things up. And now I have a very distinct process before I even talk to clients, and the conversations are so deep and just invigorating, and they're really well received.
So tell us about so clients coming in or virtually, what do you do pre that encounter, or what is your process now?
So I'm preparing before I even get on the call with the client and connecting to them. First of all, I'm settling myself down, and then I'm connecting to them, and I'm looking at their energy and their aura and seeing what comes out. And then I just make note of it. And if any kind of storyline comes up, and then I don't really push that agenda, it always ends up coming forward.
Yeah.
And you start to see how things connect. And then during the call, I'm hearing words or, things that come up. For instance, I was on a call this morning, and I just kept hearing fear, fear, fear. So then that guides me forward in the conversation. So yeah, I use it before, and then I use it during the call, just to as guideposts and as touch points. And it's been years now, and it never fails. Yeah.
Do you take notes for your own? I tend to be a a doodler, and like I don't even think I could do a reading without a pen in my hand. Is that something that, like, I notice, I don't have anything here for you yet, but so here's like, there's my little doodle, and then there will be underlines, and like the word fear would have been underlined. Is that does it come through your hands that way, or is it more a clairaudience this way?
I'll make note of it. So when I'm connecting to a client pre-call, I'm making little notes, and I've always been a sort of a bullet point kind of person where I just write words or, yeah. So I'll write down what comes to me and just sort of put it aside. And I, like you, I have many notebooks, and a pen's always handy. And then during the call, when they're speaking, if something's popping out to me, I'll write it down for sure, just so that it just lands it a bit more for me.
Yeah, and so you can kind of track back, like in the process of the reading or the session, you can kind of make sure that gets looked at or opened up a little.
Yeah, if that's what's coming through for me, then it's pretty prevalent for them, right?
Yeah.
So, you're looking for an opportunity to have those discussions. And because of what I do in working in the corporate field, not everything is fully accepted. So we have to just luckily I have a background that allows me to say it in a way that I know will be received, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, you are creating a bridge from one language to another, kind of, and you're sort of translating so that it can be received in a way that makes sense to that person.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about how like this idea of the guiding vision that you and I have done with others in the work that we've been doing. The guiding vision is you go into stillness and you get a vision that just comes in before you even meet the client or before you have a session with the client. And I have just been kind of shocked by the accuracy of those over so many reading sessions. Even something as silly as, say, I'll get a guiding vision of a box of rye crisp crackers. I have no idea why that's coming in, and then I'll be like, I do not want to talk to the client about rye crisp crackers, like, please give me something better. And then going along, and it'll just kind of show up as the answer. And like, you've got this extra layer because you've got to translate that into business language. How does that work for you?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Sometimes I'm like, really? Talk about that?
Please don't make me say that.
Please don't make me say that.
Yeah.
But, for instance, so a client the other day, I got an image of a person running. It looked like it was running away from me, like running away, right? So I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll just make note of that. And then during the phone call that we were on, it just clicked on me that I was like, oh, he's not running away anymore. He's now running towards. And so that becomes the conversation point, right? And so I'm using it similarly, where I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what to do with that yet, but I trust that it's going to come forward. And then it usually lands somewhere. And I'm like, okay, do you like rye crisps? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I don't even know why that came into my mind. And then sometimes also we get this really intensively downloaded information, or the sense of like, and then maybe the client will have some resistance to that. Do you find that that's more likely in a business setting, or maybe even less likely, that you run against that edge of like, you are pretty clear, or I'm pretty clear that we know what we're receiving, and then the client's like not quite there? What do you do in that case, or how do you work around that?
I always say that I'm a gardener and I just plant seeds. So I plant and see how is it rejected or pushed back on, or right? And then I'm feeling them out, and then we'll sort of move our little chess piece a little bit over here and talk about this, and then there's usually an entry place for it to come back up. And if it's said in a different way, the feedback I got was, I can't hear that right now. So then
Yes.
I say, okay, great, let's keep moving, tell me more. And then there's usually the same thing can be said in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Like, we're never trying to, like, sometimes I'll use the image of it's a giant tangled ball of yarn with a whole bunch of threads in it, and we don't have to, if one thread isn't pulling easily, gosh, there's so many more, too many more, so let's just look somewhere else and not worry about having a super linear process to get to understanding or helping the client.
Yeah, and that was a big learning for me when I first started this work, is not to get attached to what was coming forward. Sort of see it, let it rest, let it sit there,
Yes.
and then follow. Like, it's more of an allowing thing for me now, rather than before it was like, no, you have to hear this.
Right.
That at all,
right. Well, and I find too, just in my own life, that's kind of the practice too. It's like, here's a strand of information, follow that kind of dries up for a while, something else, going with that. And it really takes the pressure off having to do anything like right, or it just takes the pressure off, just knowing we'll get there over time. Yeah.
That trust piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very big in trusting.
When you some people have a really, like, I'm more clairvoyant and clairaudient. I don't deal that much with, say, the departed, or it's more visioning and channeling for me. But do you have those other pieces, or is it really the clairaudience and this sense of knowing for you, or almost like you're like solving the puzzle with the person? Do you have those other spirit activities as a big part, or where does that lie for you?
It's interesting because in work, when I'm in work mode, I don't, but outside of it, I do. I'll be walking in the parking lot of a grocery store, and somebody's there, and or somebody comes forward to me, or but not in the workplace so far. Right. And then a lot of times at night, right, I'll get my own spirit guides will come to me and talk to me, and we'll have a conversation. So far with my clients, it's clairaudient, but I take these little nudges in my outside life, if you will, of the work mode, and I'm guessing that the universe is bringing me forward there. Yeah. In my own comfort level. That's right. Have you noticed a shift in the types of clients that are coming to you over the years since you started opening up to the intuitive work as well? For sure. I work with mostly women now, because women seem more intuitively driven, or for me at least, that was a big shift for me, is I worked with a lot of male energy. I still do work with males, but they tend to have more of that feminine energy to them. And so that would be the big shift that I've seen over the last maybe 2 years. Oh, so like as you've added your gifts into the mix, you've attracted clients that are interested in those pieces too, or at least willing to take a look. And I think it's a resonance thing, as I've learned. And I was raised in a very we're talking energy, right? Like from a male energy perspective, that was me. That was how I learned to work in the world. And I was raised with males. I didn't have the female energy coming in. But as I learned about female energy and I started to express that more or live within that more, then I was more resonant with people that had more of that themselves, whether they're male or female. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting shift for me.
Well, that's interesting too, because I feel like this intuitive work or spiritual work is, it's pretty subtle, and it's pretty non-linear. It's more like an exploration or a journey or a sensing, and then bringing that back to, like, I also, maybe I'll meditate or teach, and we're kind of like way out there, and then I'll come back, and then the linear part of me, like if I have to write something and explain it, and I'm sure that's the same process, like it is very helpful to have the wide open and then bring it back down to and here we're going to break it down step by step and look at it, which is kind of what you're doing, I would think, with clients. Like, what are all these crazy ideas? They're right, crisp. And then let's just bring it down and figure out what this means.
Yeah. Sure. I love what you said, subtle. For me, when I first started this work, I was expecting it to be some sort of
like a movie
or something. But it's subtle. It's steady and it's subtle. And I don't know. Once I accepted that, then it just really took off, and I just paid attention differently.
Yes.
My work as an executive coach, it's all around behavior and like how our behavior expresses our leadership and all those ideas. So it's really fascinating when with a client, you see them starting to open up to the subtle feedbacks, the subtle pieces that are being dropped for them. I love it.
Well, we were both, we were raised kind of in, we were just talking, we were raised kind of in similar parts of the world, me in Seattle and you just in a little bit above in Vancouver, BC, and kind of the magic of the ocean and well, for me, Puget Sound and the what is it, the Straits of Juan de Fuca? I don't even, all the islands, all of that up there, and just having that resonance with nature. And nature is so subtle and so whole and so integrated, like none of it's linear, and yet it's all completely integrated. And so that's really helped me make sense of this way of receiving information. Like, I don't have to understand it all. I can just take it in as a whole and allow that to kind of come back out when needed. So I don't know, that just has been a piece that's helped me, that being in nature, and especially
it's huge for me. When I first started working with you and learning this, I actually couldn't be inside. I wanted to be outside. I was so drawn to nature that I felt a bit, I don't know, agitated when I was inside. I just like I needed to be in that, because that was so true for me. So that is so true for me.
Well, and I think I guess it's not true for all executives, but a lot of people in, maybe they're on screen time a lot, or they're in these kinds of meetings probably now, or they're in office-y settings, and if you have too much of that, that's it's all man-made or it's electronic, and so it has a different vibrational level or different resonance than the natural world. So just changing that perspective, or asking someone to sit in stillness without a screen instantly changes, or to breathe is kind of things that bring people back to themselves.
Absolutely. And so I have little ways that I do that. I speak to it as in like our energy can get splayed, or I use energy and attention in intermingled because attention is a more acceptable word in the
Uh-huh.
corporate world. But when we are in that area like you're speaking about, in front of a screen all the time and on all the time and having all these inputs constantly, our attention, our energy gets splayed everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So just teaching them to call back our energy
Yes.
and our attention is a game changer for most people in the corporate world, because they don't recognize that they've been splayed everywhere every day. And then they're
How,
expecting themselves to perform at a certain level, but that they're not performing with all of them.
yeah. How would you ask somebody to bring their energy back? What would be the way that you would suggest it to them?
I usually suggest when they go to bed at night, when they close their eyes, just call back their energy.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the person, I'll take them through a visualization, depending on how acceptable to that they are. Or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's just language, right? It's just words,
Mm-hmm.
if they work that way. And just calling back their energy at night.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can move into grounding and
Mm-hmm.
running energy. Mm-hmm. And then you start to tap into intuition and the subtleness of all of that. Mm-hmm. And it really does shift quite a bit for people when they are working with all of themselves.
When a client has a big decision to make, do you have intuitive tools that you might give to them, or some mix of intuition and coaching tools, executive coaching tools? Because I think people are often faced with these pretty big decisions that maybe are going to affect lots of people, or are going to be a good idea or a bad idea. Yeah. Do you have any ways of helping them when they're at that point of, like, we all have in personal lives, we always have decisions, but in business, is there a way that you combine these do you have something that you offer them to help with that?
It is. And I have the blessing of, usually my clients, I'm working with them more than once. So
yeah.
You start to build this. And so mostly in my work, I have to start in the teaching mode, where I'm teaching them more science-based information, because that's usually readily acceptable to them. So we talk about things like behavior and brain science and all the things that gets them like, oh, this is a real thing. For my business, I always work on 4 quadrants. So mentally, right, thoughts and how those are built and all of those things, emotionally, those feedback loops we can get emotionally, and how we can gain information there. And then we can get into energetic, which is really fun, talking about our energy and how we use that. And then physically, I mean, we could start just talking about our nervous systems and how to help with that. So I'm building a foundation with them that allows for these conversations. And then, but I use all 4 pieces in every call. So I'm usually looking for the entryway,
right,
on what they can hear from me. And I'll speak to them from that place. And so if someone's needing a big decision, we could be talking about it from any of those 4 angles.
Right.
So it's really dependent on the client. But most of the time I tell them to go for a walk. Take a breath.
Yeah.
Take your phone.
Right.
Just look up, find 3 things you haven't seen before to try and, get out of your habitual pattern thinking. Because you can only see what you can see from the place that you're at. So it's always expansive. That's my thing. Yeah.
Well, that's such a good point. I sometimes talk about this idea of, like, when synchronistic or so-called coincidental events happen in our lives, the reason they matter is not necessarily so much for what the big event is that it's a disruptor. It's a disruptor out of the habitual zone, so that we can be like, here we are marching around our day. Oh, wait, what was that? There's an actual world out here that I can work with. Okay, now I am on track again.
Yeah, and that's what happens, right? Head down.
Yeah.
Through.
On my phone.
Look up.
Yes. Look up. Look around. Yeah.
It's always just that small turning of the dial to shift perspective, and things just open up that we didn't see before. And I think that's the most fascinating thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's so interesting. I didn't know that we had a mutual friend, and I was just recalling, like I think he was in my meditation last night, which like I didn't know why, and then that's the kind of synchronistic thing that something happens that's odd, we kind of, it disrupts the habitual, and then when it comes around, we're paying attention to it extra, and that's sort of the way that we're sort of led on this path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you teach people that this can be quite fun,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
interesting. Life doesn't have to be about this sort of robotic monotony of trudging through, right?
Yeah,
it can be quite interesting and engaging in a different way. Like you said, you didn't know why, and then it comes forward, and you're like, that's kind of cool.
Right, right. And I'm actually even the rye crisp that's been a kind of a little joke for today, but I'm imagining there will be something like, why? I don't know. I'm going to sort of see what happens in the land of rye crisp. I have no idea, but or something. So we'll just see what happens. Yeah. Well, anything else you'd like to add or tell people about? I'm going to put all the information on how to find you and so forth, so we don't need to do that. But any other thoughts that you'd like to share?
No, I love these conversations because it just, right? It's just, life is really interesting, and we're meant to be alive in it. And I know at times that can feel like a heavy lift, but it doesn't actually have to. And that's, I think, what intuition does. What it did for me is it opened up my line of sight to things that I could never have expected, or just, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and for me, I'm not particularly tethered. Part of my job is to like be exploring in these other areas as much as possible, which at first I thought that I would become ungrounded, but actually it's the more I explore in the realms of, I don't know, dreams or just all of these other realms, the more integrated I feel, or the more whole I feel, which is a big surprise. I thought there would be a split, but it's like it's more coming back to the self, which is amazing.
Wholeheartedly. I'm more grounded, more me, more than I've ever been. And I probably shied away from the work for a long time because I was like, oh, I can't.
It's right? Too much. It's too much. Yeah.
But it's the opposite. It's the exact opposite of just when it's done. I don't know if well is the right word, but when it's done on a consistent basis and we are constantly grounding and connecting to ourselves, we just are way more present in life. And I think that it is grounding. It is like, I think I was way up there when I was doing the things in the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we become more present to ourselves, and then we can respond with more authentically to situations that come up, and then that shows a template to the other person we're working with, and then everybody's just becoming nicer and more thoughtful. Because
we're not trying to prove our worth or our valuation or whatever it is. We're not working at that frequency, right? We're working at a different frequency.
We start to work in true collaboration and cooperation, which is, the next step for the world. So
and that is where it's going.
Yep. Well, Jenna, thank you so much for your time today, and I'm just so happy to be working with you. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.